I played The Division in 2022, and I think it may be the most underrated game of all time. Now, here's why. The Division has one of the most unique gameplay experiences compared to any other game that I've played. The gunplay, the leveling up, and the pacing of the game are all phenomenal in my opinion. It's been years since I've played The Division, and I've since forgotten how fun it actually is. I think it's pretty safe to say that we haven't had a whole lot of good games recently. There's been a couple here and there, you know, Elden Ring was amazing, but recently, we really have not had a whole lot of good games. It's been a rough couple of years. So, when I went back to The Division, I genuinely had an amazing time, especially compared to the games that I've been playing recently. The Division is an MMORPG, kind of like Destiny or Lost Ark, that type of game. It is a huge map with lots of enemies and lots to do. You can take this on solo, or you can take it on with friends. I don't have friends who play the game, so I take it on solo most of the time, and it's still some of the most fun I've ever had in gaming, even playing solo. With or without friends, this game is amazing. You can go against other players or NPCs, and there is a lot of looting to do to build your character. There's insane builds you can do, and the end game is the best end game that I've ever played in any video game in my life. There is so much that you can do once you reach the end of the story that most people play The Division solely for the end game. Not to mention, it also has some of the most jammed-packed DLCs you will ever play. There is lots to this game that make it so great that it has to be classified as underrated. So let's hop right into it. Now, we'll talk about the current state of the game and what it's like currently later on in the video, but first I wanted to start with the map. I love the map in The Division. It takes place in New York City after a widespread virus breaks out and it throws the entire world into a pandemic. The virus has killed many people and it's incredibly dangerous, so of course economies collapsed, governments were dismantled, and the entire world was just thrown into a widespread panic. Already a pretty cool story to start off with. Because of the situation, there are a lot of criminals that took advantage, and they started to wreak havoc upon New York City. With no government, there is no police or military to come in and help, but there are a band of people called The Division, who are for situations exactly like this. They are called upon as a complete last resort. You play as a Division agent who comes to help clean up the streets of Manhattan and just keep people safe. It's a really sweet story. I do like it a lot. New York City looks and feels awesome in this game. It's a beautiful map and it really fits the theme of a post-pandemic world phenomenally well. Trash is littered throughout the streets, there are random enemies wandering around with guns, there's homeless people begging for food, nobody's in their apartments because there's no power anymore, there's abandoned cars everywhere. It all fits the theme super well. Not to mention it's a really fun map to explore as well. I do like the story a lot, but it is pretty simple. There isn't a ton of development as you play the game. It's basically just what I explained. Hey, we're in a pandemic, you are our last resort, we need your help. That's pretty much it. Sure, you go through and try to find who started the pandemic, and that's kind of the main story, is figuring out who created this virus that threw everyone into the pandemic. But other than that, there's really not much development with the story, which I don't mind at all, but the story is not the strong suit of this game. Where the real bread and butter lies is with the gameplay, the character development, and the leveling up. The entire point of the game is to obviously progress through the story and level up what is called the base of operations. The base of operations consists of 3 sections. You've got the medical wing, the electric wing, and the security wing. Each wing has its own set of story missions. Each time you complete a story mission for these wings, you get points to level up the wings. When you level up or upgrade each wing, you get new skills and you get new abilities, and those just make your character better at the game. You can use 2 skills while playing The Division. There's skills like a healing station where you drop it and it will consistently heal you while you're in the station. There's also skills like a turret which you can throw and it will shoot enemies and distract enemies and just aid you while you're killing other enemies. There's lots of different skills to choose from, and each of the 3 wings has their own set of skills that you can upgrade and you can use, and the more you upgrade each wing, the more strong these skills become. Which skills you choose will heavily impact how you play the game. Obviously, just like any other game, your goal is to reach a high enough level to meet the requirement to play the next story mission. That way you reach the end of the story and you're now in endgame. There is a lot of safe houses scattered throughout the map that have their own set of side missions. So basically what you do is you go to the next safe house, you play these side missions to level up, that way you can play the next main story mission. Safe houses also give you what are called encounters, and these give you more points for each of those 3 wings. So you have medical encounters, you've got electric encounters, and security encounters. You do these, they take just a few minutes, and they give you more points for that wing. So if you're really close to having enough points to get the next upgrade, but you don't want to do a whole nother story mission, or you aren't a high enough level to do the next story mission for it, you can just do an encounter. It'll give you a few points points for that wing, and then you can go and get your upgrade. So the progression through the game is a lot of fun, and there's lots to do. But of course, the looting in the game is even better than the progression. Getting better gear for your character is the entire point of the game, especially in Endgame. Gear is how you build your character, and it will heavily impact how you play the game. There are 3 main categories to consider when you are equipping a new piece of gear. There's firearms, there's stamina, and there's electronics. Firearms is how strong your weapons are and just how much damage that you can deal. Stamina is basically how much damage you can take without dying, and electronics is basically your skill power. So that turret and that medical station I was talking about before, the more you have specced into electronics, the stronger those skills are going to be for you. There are 6 pieces of gear that you can equip that will dictate how strong each of these categories are. So when you get a new vest, or you get some new gloves, or you get a new backpack, it will show you how this new piece of gear will affect your build. A new backpack could give you a ton of stamina, but it might take away a lot from your skill power. And that goes for each one of the 6 gear slots that you have. So it's up to you to decide how you want to build your character. You might have a pair of gloves that will give you a lot of firepower, and that's going to make your weapons really good, but it might take away from how much damage you can take. So it's going to make you weaker, but your guns are stronger. And it's up to you to decide what you want to do. You can have a character that heavily relies on skill power, so your skill powers are very strong, and the cooldown to get these skills back are very quick, so you're constantly using skill powers, but you might not be able to take a whole lot of damage without dying. Or you might have a super tanky build where you can just take all the bullets in the world and you can mow through enemies, but your skill powers virtually do nothing for you. It's really up to you how you build your character, and that's what makes this game so special. Not to mention the gameplay is phenomenal. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the gameplay experience in this game is unlike any other game that I've played. The Division heavily focuses on taking and ducking behind cover. It focuses on being strategic on how you take down enemies, where you take cover, what skills to use, and that sort of thing. The enemies and bosses in this game can be extremely big bullet sponges. That turned a lot of people off towards this game back in the day when it released, but I personally love it. It makes the game extremely challenging, and it forces you to think outside of the box and figure out strategical ways to take down these bullet sponge bosses. If there is a huge boss running at you, and it's going to take 4 or 5, maybe even 6 mags to take them down, and they are rushing you, you're going to be forced to be strategic, and I like that. It's very challenging. Some battles can get extremely intense. It really puts your character build to the test. I love the way that you take cover in this game. It's extremely well done, and it's very easy to learn. Pretty much every object that you see in the map, you can take cover behind. You can also move from one cover to another by just holding your action button. On PC, that would be spacebar. So you can take cover, as well as you can move to another cover by holding spacebar. When you aim down sights while you're behind cover, you will peek out of cover and start shooting. Once you stop aiming down sights, you're going to take cover again. This mechanic of gameplay in high intensity situations is so much fun. It makes the game flow so well. It makes every combat situation different. There's different places to take cover behind. There's different ways to engage with the enemy. You really use this cover to your advantage. That is the way the gameplay works. With different cover to take and different types of enemy to go up against, like I said, it really does make every battle encounter much different. Aside from other Tom Clancy games, there is no other game that has a cover system or a gameplay system like The Division, and that's why I love it so much. Like I mentioned, there are different types of enemies you can encounter as well. There are snipers that obviously snipe you from far away. There are people that are going to rush you with either an axe or a shotgun. There are people that throw grenades. That's their whole point, is to just throw grenades at you, and it's very annoying. There are people that shoot flames at you. There's people that shoot bullets at you. There's huge chunky bosses that will run at you with LMGs that hardly ever stop firing. Mid-range enemies, LMG enemies, sniper enemies, SMG enemies. Each type of enemy you are going to play against differently, and that makes the gameplay so much fun. It really diversifies each encounter that you have with enemies. So that's basically what you do in the game. That's the main story. That's how you progress through it. It's how you level up, build your character, that sort of thing. But that is far from all that you do in The Division. There is a massive area on the map that is called the Dark Zone, where you can do PvE and you can do PvP. The Dark Zone is the toughest part of the entire map, and it is hard. Each enemy is higher than your level, and they have a lot of health. There are events that you can do in the Dark Zone. There's supply drops you could do. There's landmarks to clear, and plenty to keep you busy. The main purpose is to loot. The Dark Zone drops some of the best loot that you're going to find throughout the entire game. If you need better loot, you go to the Dark Zone and you grind for it. But it's not quite that easy. Once you get your loot, you do have to extract it in order to use it. You have to go to an extraction point on the map, and you call in a helicopter that takes your loot. It takes a minute and a half for that helicopter to arrive. And during that time, your location is marked on the map, so everybody playing PvP is gonna come and ruin your life. Also, waves and waves of NPCs come at you during these 90 seconds. If you die before you attach your loot to the helicopter, helicopter to get it extracted, you lose your loot. Now you can go back and pick it up, but if you die and come back to the extraction point, all of the NPCs are still gonna be there, as well as probably those people that killed you PvP. And those people might have just taken your loot. So let me tell you, those 90 seconds really feel like it's 90 minutes. The intensity of trying to extract good loot that took you over an hour to get is unlike anything I've ever dealt with, especially when you're doing it solo. It is the only part of the Division that I've really struggled with playing solo. So it might be something you want to hop on with a group of people, maybe randoms or some friends, but the Dark Zone is definitely the hardest thing to do solo. It can be done, and it is fun having a great solo build for the Dark Zone, but it is very difficult. It's an incredibly unique aspect to the Division. It also has its own leveling system as well. You have your normal levels where you're doing the missions and encounters, you'll level up, but you also have Dark Zone levels. It's almost a completely separate game. If you get sick of grinding missions and encounters and just playing through the story, you can go to the Dark Zone and level up. Now, let's talk about the current state of the game and what hopping into it now in 2022 looks like. Obviously, the game came out a while ago. It came out clear back in 2016, and even back then it wasn't widely popular either. To this day, I don't really know why that is, but when it did release, it already wasn't a super popular game. So fast forward 6 years later to now, there's even less players playing. Like I mentioned earlier, the game is still very fun solo, but there are certain areas of the game that really do shine when you play with a group of people like the Dark Zone. Matchmaking isn't great, but there is a very strong community of people that still religiously play this game. So if you really want people to play this game with, you absolutely still can find people. And the community is great. I've found a lot of fun people to play with even now. But it is not like it was back in 2016. Compared to a lot of games that have come out recently though, this is far from a bad game to play. In fact, even compared to some great games, The Division holds up in my opinion. The DLCs are unmatched. They're some of the most fun I've ever had with expansions. First off, right now you can get the game and all of its DLCs for like $10 on Steam, which is wild. The first DLC is called the Underground DLC. This expands the adventure down to the subway and the sewage systems underneath the city of New York. There's a whole new level system so you can grind to max level for Underground, which means you'll have Dark Zone levels, normal levels, and Underground levels. In the Underground, you go through and play missions, and you can set handicaps for yourself. The stronger the handicap you set, the more loot and rewards you're gonna get at the end of your mission. And that's basically how Underground works. The second DLC is the Survival Expansion. This almost feels like a minigame. Basically, you're sent to the Dark Zone to find a cure for a disease, and your helicopter crashes and goes down. You are now in the middle of the Dark Zone, in the middle of a raging storm with absolutely nothing. You have no weapons, you have no gear, you have to search for the antidote and extract it, all while you are stripped of everything. You'll have a little timer and you'll need to find the cure and extract it before the timer runs out. During that time, you need to find better weapons, you need to find heftier clothes so that you don't freeze to death, and it is a lot of fun. But it doesn't connect with the rest of the game at all. You'll get a bunch of money, you'll get XP, that sort of thing, but you don't really get loot from it, and it's completely detached from the game. Now, I really like that in my opinion. I think it's a lot of fun, but it's not like the Underground, where the Underground can directly tie with the rest of the game. All of the DLCs are incredibly fun, but the Underground DLC specifically is amazing. Like I said earlier in the video, the Endgame for the Division is so much fun that most people only play this game for the endgame content. It's hands down the best endgame content you're gonna find anywhere. There are daily and weekly missions that you get Phoenix credits for doing. You can use Phoenix credits to buy exotic weapons. Exotic weapons are a new rarity of weapons that are even better than the high-end legendary weapons. They are the best weapons you can get in the game. Once you reach max level 30, your entire goal is to reach higher world tiers. To get to new world tiers, you need to have a higher gear score. To get a higher gear score, you need better weapons and better gear, better loot. You get this by replaying missions, playing the Underground DLC, going to the Dark Zone. The better loot that you get, the higher your gear score. The higher your gear score, the more world tiers you can go up. So you play daily missions, weekly missions, you replay old missions, you play the Underground DLC, you level up in the Dark Zone. You just go on a massive looting spree. There really is a lot to do when you reach endgame, and it's super fun with friends. You also can farm for what are called gear sets. Once you have a certain amount of gear, all from the same gear sets, you're going to receive an incredibly powerful buff. These buffs and gear sets can help with your build even more, and they're a lot of fun to grind for. Having a full gear set can grant you things like 25% more health, or 40% more critical hit damage, and so on and so on. There's lots of different gear sets with lots of different buffs that they'll grant you, and that can be very useful towards challenging NPCs in the end game. Like I said, endgame is all about making your character more powerful, having a higher gear score, lore and just building your character however the hell you want. I could talk for days about how many different builds you can do, about how fun Endgame is, about how fun the story mode is. I could talk for days about how great The Division is, but that's basically the gist of it. Those are the reasons that I feel The Division is the most underrated game ever. This game truly does not get the love that it deserves. I loved this game when it came out, and I still love it now. Sure, it may be dry in the multiplayer content areas, but that doesn't make it any less fun. I really want to know what you guys think about it, so drop a comment down below, and I really appreciate you watching.